Hello, and welcome to a new episode of The Career Changers. Our guest today is Carolyn Buck Luce, author of Epic, the Women's Power Playbook, and one of America's most respected and accomplished advocates for women. She has built an amazing 5 decade career as a diplomat, Wall Street banker, consultant, healthcare futurist, professor, and philanthropist while raising a family and enduring her own losses and disappointments. Today, she's here to share her career change story and how she's coaching women to become their best selves at home, at work, and everywhere beyond and in between. Hi, Caroline. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
So I'm very excited, and I want to discuss everything about your exciting career and what you're doing now to help women. So let's start with your background. How did you start your professional life, or better, what was your first job?
Well, my actually first job was being a diplomat in the Soviet Union, representing America. So I actually have to give you a little bit of background about how I got there as a first job. You see, well, I'll just share my experience, which is my experience is that every one of us there becomes a moment, usually sometime in childhood, where all of a sudden you realize that the world is bigger than you and that you have a purpose greater than yourself. And whether you know it or not, if you think back on it, chances are that began to shape the beginnings of your career. So for me, it was 1960 in America. We were in the middle of a Cold War. John F. Kennedy was running for president. I was 8, and I was having to do atomic bomb drills called duck and cover, like hiding under your desk in case there's an atomic bomb, as if that would help you. And John F. Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." And I was like, "Reporting for duty, sir." And that began to have me start thinking about what would I do when I grew up. And instead of thinking about being a ballerina, which that had been an earlier idea, all of a sudden I was like, I want to be a world leader, just like John F. Kennedy. And that got me thinking. And the farthest that I could think was 10 years when I'd be 18, going to college. Because that for me was, okay, that's when you're a grown-up. That's when you start your career. And I ended up studying Russian. So my first job was representing America in the Soviet Union in the middle of the Cold War with 20 of us. There was a life-size American home that we built, and 10,000 Soviet citizens would come through every day. And there I was, 21 years old, telling the story of America. That was my first job.
Well, this sounds an incredible experience, especially to be a first job and so young. So well done. And it also matches what was your dream job as well as a child. So it's pretty incredible. Sometimes people have dream jobs, but then that change while growing up, and you managed to actually realize that dream. So let's talk about your journey. From diplomat, as you mentioned, to Wall Street banker, consultant, healthcare futurist, professor, and philanthropist while raising a family and enduring losses and disappointment. How has been your career change journey?
Yeah, so what I first have to make sure that I'm really communicating is I have never felt that my job is what someone's paying me to do. My job is to become the leader I long to be at home, at work, and in the world. And whoever was paying me a check, it was like they were sending me to graduate school. So no matter what I was doing, I never thought that my job was what they were paying me to do. They were paying me to learn the job I wanted to learn, which was to be the leader I wanted to be at home, at work, in the world. So when I was in the Soviet Union, working for the diplomatic service, I was first stationed in Uzbekistan, and then Azerbaijan, and then finally Moscow. And while I was in Moscow, I went on a discovery tour because at that time, Western businesses were beginning to set up offices in the Soviet Union with this idea that détente and economic integration would make sure we didn't have a war. And I began to visit all the American businessmen. I had a little black book in order to just ask about what they're trying to accomplish. Why were they there? What's the real underlying purpose of why they chose to be there? And what I realized was I wanted to change the world, or do my part at least. And one of the things that's, and maybe it's just because of my training, I sort of always put on my hat like I'm a cultural anthropologist, trying to sort of get a sense of the organization I'm in. And in diplomacy, you're not paid to make any decisions. It's all about process. And I thought, I'm a decision girl. I'm not a process girl. And it would probably take 30 years before anyone would ask me my opinion if I stayed in the diplomatic service. So that's when I decided that I needed, for me to be the power player I wanted to be, if you wanted to change the world, you need to be as powerful as possible if you want to empower as many people as possible, which for me was what leadership is. Empowering as many people as possible. I decided, I'm going to go into business. And I'm going to get power a lot faster. And that power I can use on behalf of others. And then one day I'll be appointed ambassador. That's a faster route. So that's what got me into business, was this idea that that the private sector could be the greatest engine of transformation in the world. I didn't think diplomacy was. I thought economic flourishing was. And I wanted to learn as much as I could to be a leader in that space. So that's what got me into banking. And from there, again, I was, what I should say also is, you see, I play a decade game. That's what I learned at 8. Imagine yourself at 18. And then your job is just get there. Make that dream come true. So every decade, I have a new game where I'm imagining what's still the work left to do to be a leader at home, at work, and in the world. So I imagine it. I imagine, wouldn't it be amazing if a decade from now, I would have learned new things, had new experiences, met new people. And that's sort of what kept pulling me along. So I was an international banker. From there, I went to Wall Street to do mergers and acquisitions. One of the things about life, it's not predictable. So I was on Wall Street. I had 2 little children. So we're now at the end of my 30s, getting a divorce. And what I realized about Wall Street is the game is all about money. That's not my game. My game is all about developing people to be the leaders they want to be at home, at work, and in the world. So I quit Wall Street. I was getting a divorce, and I wanted to think about, okay, who are the companies where the job of a leader is to develop other leaders? And that's what brought me into the partnership of EY, a global audit, tax, and consulting company, because there, the main responsibility for partner is to develop people. And that's where I spent 20 years.
Well, it's an amazing career, and you express it so well, giving meaning to each transition. So it's really important during our journey that we do something that is meaningful for us, but also that we have an impact on the world and the people that are surrounding us. So how and when did you find that your inspiration to become specifically a women's advocate?
Oh, I love that question. So when I think about my career, I was always the only one. And I felt that my real job, once I got into those male-dominated industries, was to be an urban guerrilla, to stir the pot for women. Because for me, I like to say that my life has been the ABCs of my life, anyone but Carolyn. Because what's fascinating is almost all the actual particular jobs I had within these companies, I created. They didn't exist. I don't think I would have gotten the jobs that existed. So I had to create new jobs, create new businesses within the business. And what I saw was that women and historically underrepresented groups were undervalued, underappreciated, underemployed, and they had magic that wasn't being tapped. Now, I should also say that one of my heroes wasn't just John F. Kennedy when I was 8. It was my mother, Minna, who was one of only 2 women in her law school class at the University of Chicago in the 1940s. And her entire career was to work for underserved families in terms of social services, justice, equality, and she ended up becoming a judge in order to do that. So I guess part of me wanted to be just like her, but I also wanted to see the rise of women, and I knew how hard it was for me. It's interesting, for me, because I play my decade game, which always gives me the destination that I'm longing for. Women tell me, how can you think 10 years? I can't even think 10 minutes. Because women are doing so much for so many all of the time. And they leave themselves last. So, the world can only get better if men and women are playing their game. And that has to be a heart-based game. I like to say that my purpose in life, no matter what project I end up doing, is to help courageous leaders find their magic, trust their magic, and then know how to use that magic honorably to make a world that works. And that, again, that's when I said early on, there was probably a recognition that there's a purpose larger than yourself that you want to contribute to. That became my purpose. But courage comes from the word kur, heart. And it means to go forward with your heart in your mouth at times of doubt, fear, and uncertainty. So to be the leader you want to be at home, at work, in the world, you've got to be courageous. And I just believe that based on my own experiences, my purpose in life is to help women find what I know is that huge heart inside them and know that they can lead in their own way, healthy masculine and healthy feminine. And that's hard to do. That's hard to do in the kinds of cultures we live in.
Some beautiful words, and I feel very touched and inspired, and hopefully all our listeners are feeling the same. And you mentioned a few times the decade game. So let's talk more about this. You say throughout history, in the stories and myths authored by men, women have been casted with character flaws that have distorted and contained their power and purpose. That is why I created the decade game, which I've been playing since I was 8, as you mentioned earlier. So, what is the decade game and why a game?
Well, first of all, it has to be a game because if you're not having fun, you're probably playing someone else's game. And if you want to solve both a wicked and a worthy problem, you have to have fun doing it. So the decade game is a way of imagining all that you are trying to become without thinking about how do I do it. Now, the first thing I'll say is we are playing someone else's game right now, women, and that game is rigged. It's a rigged game. You cannot win. So we play not to lose. We dream big, but we play small. And there's a reason for that. And one of the things I say to women is, look, let go of the guilt. We're all guilty, but no one's to blame because we didn't set that story up. So you mentioned that I talk about the archetypes of the stories that we're in. So no matter where I go in the world, well, I'll just ask you, were you raised to be a good girl?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And what does that mean for you? Give me a couple good girl stories about what good girls do or don't do.
I think good girls have difficulties sometimes in saying no. They may have difficulties in voicing their opinion where it's controversial to the majority of people that are in the room. They stay in their place.
Exactly. So no matter where I've gone in the world, I ask that question, who was raised to be a good girl? Everyone's hands go up. And then I ask another question, who here is super ambitious? And I'm not sure whether people are raising their hand or fixing their hair.
Because they don't have the courage.
That's right, because good girls are not supposed to be.
Yes.
Okay, so what happens when good girls get connected to their purpose and get committed to actually get power and use that power in order to live and act in their purpose? They meet another story. They meet another fairy tale called Goldilocks. Do you remember the story of Goldilocks? The little girl runs away, goes into the forest, finds the house of the 3 bears, and then messes everything up. And she's told that she's to this or to that, and never just right. So that's why we play not to lose. Because every time we try to express our power and our purpose, someone tells us we're to this or to that, but not right, not just right, or we tell ourselves that way. And so it turns out we don't live in our lives and our relationships. We live in the stories we tell about our lives and our relationships. And we're telling an old story that was someone else's story about us. So I want women to learn how to be, first of all, an epic storyteller. Now, my book is called Epic, the Women's Power Play book. But I'm not using epic as an adjective of bigger than, better than, king of the universe, master of all, thinner than, richer than. That's a masculine game. I'm using it in the original meaning of the word. Epic means a long form story of daring to do, and daring to be. You know, we talk about the Epic of Homer or the Iliad epic. So it turns out that we have everything we need right now to be an epic storyteller and tell a new story. So I want people to be epic storytellers, and that's part of the decade game. The second part, it's a game. So do you play jigsaw puzzles?
No.
So for anyone who hasn't played a jigsaw puzzle has lots of little pieces that, if put together correctly, creates a great picture.
Yeah, I played before. I play, yes.
Yeah.
I don't play right now, but I did play.
All right. So what do? You buy the puzzle because you love the picture.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the decade game, you build the most beautiful, amazing picture that if you spent 10 years just letting yourself dream big, play big, at home, at work, and in the world, that's the picture. Now, when you buy a jigsaw puzzle, you then open it up, put all the pieces down, and then you're convinced that you're missing a piece. Right? Oh my, they must have made a mistake in the factory. We don't have all the pieces here. Well, it turns out you do. All the pieces were in the box, and the puzzle is just how do we put them together? So the decade game starts with the epic story of, wouldn't it be amazing if I wasn't afraid? Wouldn't it be amazing if I played to win as opposed to played not to lose? What would that look like? Who's my future character? And then you puzzle it out and you give yourself a job. Again, the job isn't what someone's paying you to do. You are the CEO, the Chief Experience Officer, and you are the CIO, the Chief Investment Officer of your time, your trust, your talents, and your treasures. And the game is all about, how do I put all those pieces together and look at all of my assets, tangible and intangible, all my talents, my treasures, my trust, my time, and how do I experiment and create little bets based on what I can do right now, but those little bets have the character, the great epic character of the future playing today in each of those little bets. So let me just give you a simple example. At 60, my firm had mandatory retirement for partners. So that was 10 years ago for me. So yes, I'm now a septuagenarian. Very excited about that.
Oh, you look amazing.
Well, that's what love has to do with it.
Oh.
So at 60, I'm retired from my firm, where I had built a global healthcare business, $1 billion business for EY. So I imagined my new character for 70. So I imagined that at 70, I would know myself and be known by the people who love me, my family, and the people who count on me, the world, as an organizational shaman, inspiring humans to live epic lives. Now, at 60, I'd never met a shaman, but that sort of came to me. What would be the character? What would be the epic character of an amazing story? So once I had that in my head, my decade game, that's my destination, because your destination needs to have destiny in it, because we're talking about an epic, then you don't play the game in the future. You bring that game to where you are right now and say, okay, what would an organizational shaman inspiring humans to live epic lives do now? So I'm going to give you two examples. 1 week after I retired, I got remarried. And we ended up climbing Kilimanjaro for our honeymoon. Why? Because I thought, I don't think a shaman would go to a beach in Fiji for her honeymoon. I think she would do something much more adventurous. And so it's through that lens, we made a decision right then. I also professionally continued, and still do, be a corporate strategist working with leadership teams to help them find their magic, trust their magic, and use that magic honorably. But immediately, instead of showing up as an Uber consultant, in my head and in my heart, I was showing up as an organizational shaman, inspiring humans to live epic lives. And it immediately began to change the way I practiced working with clients. Instead of being all about the expert answer, my focus was, how do I become all about the questions that haven't yet been asked? So that's a little bit about how to play the game.
So we have 10 more minutes. I have so many questions for you that I'm trying to choose which one to go for. So you say the women want to empower others, except they are, sorry, this showing up. They are not comfortable being powerful as they are themselves. How can women become comfortable with being powerful?
Practice. It's important to practice. I'll give you an example of something I did, which everyone can do. While I was at EY, I became an adjunct professor at the Graduate School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia. Because of my early background as a diplomat, I wanted to give back. And I created my own course called Women and Power, because I saw how ambivalent women are about power and ambition, because they're all good girls, just like you and me. I gave no tests. Everyone only had to, at the end of the semester, write a paper. And it was a purpose paper. And this is what they had to do. They had to imagine their purpose. Why are they on the planet? Why are they, in particular, on the planet? What's their unique contribution? And then they had to do an inventory of their current power. Now, power is not good or bad. It's just a current. It's like electricity. It's like water. It just flows. But we give it a bad name because of the way we've seen it used. It also comes in many different currencies: beauty, relationships, resources, personality, status. So they had to do an inventory of their current powers, all those currencies, and then a 2-year action plan on how they were going to intentionally increase their power and use that power intentionally to make progress on their purpose. I did that for 10 years. And even though it was at the graduate level and there were no numbers, people said it was their hardest class that they'd ever taken. So we have to recognize it is hard, because when we use power, we get pushback. And then we get pushed back into playing not to lose. This is one of the reasons why I coach women only in groups through a Decade Game Masterclass, because it's too hard to do it by yourself. I mean, we have been trying for 3,000, 4,000 years. But way back when, women were burned for that. So we have to do it with women together. You know, I have always, in every company I've been, I've helped build the women's networks. But women now need to, instead of just coming together and sharing Ain't It Awful and the stories about our sadness or our frustrations, we need to be together to stand for each other's power, beauty, ambition, commitment, and so that we can see our tears of both sorrow and joy in each other's eyes. Because together, we can change the world.
So we are reaching the end of this episode. If anyone would like to get in touch with you, how and where they can find you?
So you can find me at Carolyn at mydecadegame.com. Carolyn at mydecadegame.com. And if you write to me, you'll hear back from me.
That's great. So what type of advice would you give to anyone during their journey to self-realization based on your experience?
The biggest thing I would say is just to remember that your job is not what they're paying you to do. And to be the leader you long to be, it doesn't make any difference where you're practicing it. Because the big, juicy part of life is not just getting to I'm enough. Enough is nice, but not sufficient. I want women to go for epic. I want women to choose epic, to know that you have the power of the universe inside you. Whether you have children or not, you create life. And you can create your own life by design, not default. And know that we are in a free fall into the future. The models of what future leaders doesn't yet exist. And they are the models for both men and women to be the leaders you long to be at home, at work, and in the world. And know that you are on that job from the moment you get up to the moment you go to sleep. And it's epic.
Well, thank you, Carolyn, for joining us today and sharing your inspirational story and wisdom with our listeners.
You are very welcome. I so enjoyed it.
And we enjoyed too, and definitely find so much inspiration from your words, and also being very deep and very kind. And the last message for our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tune in next week for a new inspirational episode of The Career Changes. Thank you.